Rick and Morty, Rick's new hat. It starts out with the beginning that's confusing and hard to get invested in because it seems to star some guy I've never seen before, and there isn't much dialogue. He uses a helmet to see into the cavemen days. It's realistic that we don't get to know what the cavemen are saying, and it's good that we see little pictures representing it. A caveman runs after a small animal and screams at a guy who looks nothing like him called the Think Giver. He uses his weird sword to attack Caveman Rick, and the Think Giver tells them to go help people with the gifts of intelligence and invent their way out of the ancient cold. It's weird that he calls them my lovely, but he seems to be a good guy right now. The Rick shows off some flamethrower ray gun thingy, but the cavemen get scared of it and throw stuff at him, causing him to make a weapon for revenge, only to find out that all of a sudden the cavemen have been hit by a freeze ray, and this actually upsets him and causes them to try to get back at the Think Giver. Then the present day, Morty tells Rick on the puzzle planet that he's become a puzzle piece and needs help. Rick tells me he told Morty not to do this, and Morty offended the aliens by gluing their puzzle to cardboard. I wish I knew why, because if it doesn't make any sense, then it's really forced. Then someone tells Rick to join his jigsaw puzzle, because everyone fits right in. Rick calls him out as using a weak excuse, and then says that because nobody can actually fit in with each other, there must be something else keeping the puzzle pieces together. A magnet at the center of the planet. He already knows that the metal bringing them together is a specific kind of super advanced metal, and already knows that it's what this freak's belt buckle is made out of. So he can just press a button to switch the polarity. Whatever he did upset the bad guy, and he grabs Morty, who's still a puzzle piece. We cut to Rick being near some fire, and he says to someone that that's how he ran out of hyperspace gas fighting that puzzle idiot. So he needs some refueling at a gas station that's coincidentally manned by a puzzle piece person. Since when does his spaceship get fueled by gas instead of being provided with infinite energy by a microverse battery? Apparently this takes place in a separate universe from the show, where in all of his years, Rick never got that idea. We're also not told how Morty got back to normal, so I have to just assume that Rick uploaded his data into a clone body. Morty politely asks to go to the gift shop. Rick says Morty's tacky for doing this after they blew up a planet. Rick must be being sarcastic when he says that the Cronenberg's reality has a gift shop. So apparently, in this other universe, Rick still has a past experience where he and Morty ended up turning everyone on their planet into Cronenbergs. Morty lampshades that was a low blow. It's especially uncalled for because they didn't really blow up the whole planet, or else there wouldn't be a floor to walk around on with a gift shop. And yet there's a banner saying Planet in Flames. Huh? I guess everyone's in a space station right now. I don't know why Rick's letting him do this unsupervised on alien planets where anything could happen to him by surprise. The menacing person says creepy things as if he already knows him. He understands that he's afraid of being unseen, ignored, unloved, and forgotten, and he insists that paying him money for a hat will solve all of his problems. Let me guess. It's an evil hat. He's told the hat will make him be adored. He seems to be getting brainwashed because he's too worked up over trying to buy the hat. To be fair, he is on an alien planet, so anything could be possible. So for all he knows, a hat could do whatever he wants. Thankfully, Rick showed up because he was taking too long, and drags him away, telling him to snap out of it and give him the money and go. Morty says this hat stinks and wonders what he was thinking. Rick says he saved his life. Morty asks him what he's good at. He's gotta find out. He's good at surviving his adventures with Rick, but he just needs to try a bunch of hobbies and see. Rick says he doesn't know instead of just saying that, because he wants to latch out from the stress of feeling bad for him. Morty says he doesn't fit in school, I guess for being nervous. And Rick says that his life is bad because every step of it he's terrified that he's not doing something right. That's probably true, and it makes him relatable to some people. Rick says that if Morty keeps this up, he he's gonna end up regretful later on about all the things he didn't do. Since he sees Morty looking sad, he thankfully shows that he cares about him enough to say that he could make him a potion to give him huge muscles. This cheers Morty up because the muscles will make people like him. So again, he's not thinking ahead enough because he somehow doesn't realize that he would join a sports team and not have enough time to be his assistant. Morty says he's gonna go cut off the sleeves from his shirts, but he only ever wears a t-shirt. Rick says, or something, implying that even he isn't sure what to do to make that potion. Either that or he has multiple different potential ways to do it, and doesn't know which one to choose. He tells the garage AI to begin recording because the hat is swimming in unknown metals that he once observed. Surprisingly, the AI calls him Dad. He did create her after all, and he must have wanted to do that because Beth isn't as close to him anymore. But it's still surprisingly sentimental of them. I'm pretty sure that's not the case in the show. He does an experiment on the hat, and then decides to see if the hat makes him look good. Since when does he ever consider wearing hats? He never wears hats. Someone presses a button and wants to harvest his mind for the Council of Dunces. Rick's told that the council learned enough. But then the AI of the garage realizes Rick needs help. I don't know why she didn't think to do this while Rick was talking. This whole story wouldn't have happened. And that's while being generous and assuming that it makes perfect sense that Rick didn't get so suspicious of the hat after it was praised so much that he didn't refuse to let Morty buy it. Rick walks over to Morty, staring blankly with a creepy stare. Morty and Rick work out, and Rick keeps hitting his head with the center part, and eventually tells Morty that they took his mind and his hat is blocking the universe. And he could have made an effort to sound less crazy. I'm glad he can still talk like a normal person instead of being stuck quiet the whole story. I can't believe those two people survived. That doesn't make any sense. Rick says he can't think of any new science, and he references brain codes, which reminds me of the alien from the Bird Person issue. But that wasn't an IDW Rick and Morty comic. How could something from a different comic publisher be canon to this? Rick says he's a fool now just because he can't think of science. He says he's usually smart because he can feel the vibrations of the universe, and now they're gone. Huh? Being super smart doesn't mean you have magic powers like that. Morty tries to comfort him. He presses a button showing him some glass, saying to break the glass in case of ego death. I guess ego death is why he broke the glass with his hand. Morty finds a book under the glass that says they need the 3 laws of science, because learning about them will make him remember everything, magically. Rick says the 3 laws of science were ones that Ricks before him stole from the kingdom of the Think-Giver. Rick says that when you read the laws of science, you forget them, but they're with you forever. That doesn't make sense. How are they still with you if you forgot them? This would only make sense if they were magic words from a witch, and so reading them activated programming. Morty points out that he should have written them down. Another reason the plot never should have happened. Rick says he didn't plan for this, even though you'd think he would realize anything's possible after all the crazy adventures he's gone on. And explains that his hat's clasped on tightly. Isn't Morty gonna bandage his hand? I know Morty's not as smart as Rick, but you'd think it would be common sense to anybody that all Rick would have to do to become smart again is send his mind to a different body, which he's done before, because the body won't have the hat on it. They see the bad guys from earlier. Rick says he's not smart enough to fight them off now, and they've gotta hide. So we see the spaceship fly off to a magical used bandage planet that must have been made by a witch. Morty hates the smell, and there's too much dialogue before the planet gets shot at from a spaceship. Luckily, Rick and Morty are safe despite being stuck to a giant bandage floating in space. Obviously, if the planet was actually shattered like that, they wouldn't be able to breathe. There must be a witch's spell generating and keeping a breathable atmosphere on this planet. How could the writer not explain this? Rick says they're going home to Morty's original dimension because he thinks that's the only way he'll fix his brain. I guess because everything in his original lab is probably left untouched for him. That's an intriguing idea, them finally going back there together. But it's still obvious that whatever's in there should still be in his universe. He clearly said that the universe he moved to was identical in every way except the Cronenberg problem was solved. Identical in every way would obviously mean he could just find one of the rules of science there. Then some pages are wasted on the Council of Dunces saying boring, predictable things. For no reason, again, the two bad guys consider going to try to find Rick and Morty, even though this guy was just killed in front of them for even suggesting that they might still be alive. Huh? Then we see that the original Mr. P's been surviving among the Cronenbergs just fine despite being small and puny, and in front of a huge amount of them. At least this will get explained properly later. So far this story doesn't even try to make sense, and never would have happened. Rick would have copied all the information he knows onto a hard drive or something, so he would have been able to just download it back into his brain. The next issue starts with its beginning being confusing because we see a universe where Roman Rick tells his Morty that the Senate's out to get him. His Morty can't talk very well, and he ends up saying he's gonna kill him because enough is enough. If he was smart, he'd have done it right away without talking to get his attention first. But instead he wanted to say something cool first. Maybe he just wanted an excuse to delay doing it out of fear. Rick just puts up a force field and says they don't have time for this. Then he somehow decides that taking off the force field is a good idea, and says he has to be ready because the Thank-Giver is coming to take the intelligence back. It's interesting that this version of Morty does call him Grandpa, because it's the past. Rick lampshades that of course he's talking about the giant that's threatening them, and we see Rick pull levers and bring out fists from a coliseum to fight. So why doesn't Rick just open a portal where the Thank-Giver is and close it on him? Sure is convenient for the Thank-Giver that every single one of the Ricks all at the same time would rather have a fun fight with him when there's tons of other things they could do for fun, and they never think shooting is too good for their enemies, and that's pretty easy. Then there's darkness, and Mr. P says that the protector who's gonna save everyone woke up from his big nap. Then I see a confusing page where a text box says every night he dreams the same thing where he pleads the same thing. And we see Mr. P beg some people to give his people safe passage, and he always got told to no because they don't like weird looking people coming through here and making themselves look weak. Huh? It's not just that they're weird looking, they would be scared of them. Then old Mr. P with a beard wakes up next to his sleeping wife and says it's hard to bring people through the desert for no particular reason. Why hasn't he gotten eaten? I don't get it. He's guiding people to Rick's house because he trusts Rick to save everyone, when he should know that if it's taken this long and still hasn't happened, he doesn't care. This writer doesn't even seem to be trying to keep the continuity consistent. Since when can Cronenbergs talk instead of just mindlessly roaring or whatever? Somehow they have the last sync in the world. I guess some of the Cronenbergs kept their ability to speak out of sheer luck, but this is confusing. Rick did the same thing to everybody. At least it's not as dark. I don't know why there's so many pages of Mr. P instead of Rick and Morty talking, and the actual plot progressing. He decides to take the Cronenbergs to an amusement park. One of them says he needs to splash water on his face to keep alive. How'd he live this long? They were going through a desert. Then Mr. P wastes time talking to what remains of regular people and gets told by someone who's here somehow that he should be more loyal to other people so that once the humans are gone, they'll be able to go around to the Earth freely. They waited for that moment for a long time. And wouldn't the only humans be Morty's family? They're not restricted by just a few humans. Or is this another universe where there's somehow a lot more humans? Morty's family isn't that big. Why am I seeing people on this planet that don't look like Mr. P? I thought this guy was one of his species. Somehow, Mr. P thinks this is what Rick would do for humans, and he gets told by the bad guys that they'll be waiting for him. Well, this was a complete waste of time. And they're so focused on just him. Wasn't the story arc called Rick's New Hat? What if the Cronenberg says he lost his teeth too easily? At least the story is trying to make them interesting instead of just monsters. That's creative. Then Mr. P shows up with a book to tell them what to do to be good people, imitating Moses, which is clearly a complete waste of time because they won't listen. So I'm glad his wife told him to come down from there. Then everyone gets told to disperse and some flying spaceships show up to threaten them with fire. So there's some bad guys here that are impossible to relate to. Why are they here? Why did that happen? Did we need to see any of that? This is a confusing story, but I'm not constantly complaining about plot holes. So it seems to be interesting and keeping me invested. So that's when Rick fell through a portal and Mr. P says the story's back on track. If the writer knows this, why did it have so much focus on someone other than Rick? I'm glad Rick's horrified at seeing all the lives he ruined instead of not caring. And Morty apologizes, which should give away to them that Rick and him are responsible for what happened to them. Who else would it be? Were they blaming it on demons? Why would it have taken so long then? Mr. P greets them and says to meet his dog, who can somehow say Rick. Must be an alien dog. Rick says it's good to see him too, and Morty wants to go back to Rick's lab because he can't handle this. Rick says that since he's dumb now, he needs all the friends he can take. How do these people not know that Rick's responsible for what happens to them? He's a mad scientist who can make anything. Who else would it be? Everyone was calling out for Morty, saying they loved him before they turned into Cronenberg, so who else would be responsible? It'd make the most sense if they knew Rick was responsible, but pretended not to, because it's smarter to try to convince him to save them with politeness. It's a good thing it was explained in the show that this dimension is the dimension of Rick's worst enemy. They get threatened by some bad guys with spaceships and tanks. Why are they here? This is just so stupid. They weren't in the Cronenberg dimension every other time we saw it. And now that I'm supposed to believe they always lived here, and always wanted to take it over, when they showed no signs of existing in the pilot universe. Now it just seems so arbitrary just to have villains for the story. Because we're being expected to believe they always lived on Earth, when they could easily be from another planet. Mr. P says Rick's gonna save them all, but no one has the heart to tell him he can't, so Rick creates a portal to jump through. Why didn't its portal to Morty's world take him straight to his lab? Where else would it connect to? Morty gets scared and tells the Cronenbergs to go into the portal to try to save them. They eventually end up teleporting to near Rick's lab, where the garage door is conveniently open. I thought the garage would be locked down so nobody would be able to go there and take advantage of the tank, because Morty's family hates anything associated with Rick. Mr. P wonders why Rick let them die, and Rick somehow doesn't explain himself to him. Mr. P's upset about losing some of his friends and gets told that there's infinite versions of them, and Rick can make them replacements. Rick gets some pencils, and Mr. P says that that means infinite versions of that guy are real and feel pain. Somehow Mr. P's already figured out that Rick is normal at this point without being told, instead of assuming that he was just too apathetic to try to be awesome earlier. Morty gets guilted and scared by some Cronenbergs putting a lot of pressure on him to save the world, and somehow he thinks he should tell them all the truth, even though that obviously infuriates them into an angry mob. Morty says Rick broke this world and couldn't fix it. Rick says they always meant to come back and try to fix it, but it's obvious he's lying when he says he forgot, because Morty would have reminded him. And Mr. P says that Rick was never going to save this world. Mr. P aims a portal gun at him that's got yellow juice in it for some reason, as if it was made by the evil Morty. Rick says that a portal gun can't hurt him. It can't? Wouldn't he know it could create a portal where he is and close it on him? He's done that. The portal gun juice glows red because he found the folder with the coordinates for the worlds Rick killed. There was more than one? Well, at this point, I've seen Season 6, so what I should be saying is there's more than 2? But I'm pretty sure when this comic was released, Season 6 hadn't come out yet, so it didn't really make any sense that he said worlds. More importantly, why does this folder even exist? Rick would have wanted to forget about that. Morty's mad at him for this out-of-nowhere revelation, which at least explains why he didn't really react to what he did to Morty's planet. We see a fascist Jerry world and some other worlds as well, as Mr. P calls him out. We see a bunch of weird realities that barely explain to us what exactly happened to them, so there's really no point in showing us any of this. Morty's mad that Rick broke their sink. Rick says they got what they came here for. They did? Then out of nowhere, Mr. P grows into a menacing giant to try to force Rick to stay here and heal this reality, when it's obvious that won't guarantee it. I guess Mr. P can go back and forth between forms at will, because as an alien, he was affected differently by the Cronenberging. Or he always was able to do this. At least it makes him more competent. Rick realizes he carved the first law of science into a pencil, which says trust the accident. So they're not the laws of physics, they're just vague, cryptic stuff only he would understand. Lucky for him, reading that conveniently sent the hat pipe out of his head for no reason, and he gets brave. This kind of confusion is why I don't think this is a good arc. Then the sinister guy from Mr. P's species, Elliot, says that his flock of Cronenbergs went to him because he's their best chance for survival. Why does he think he's their best chance when he's not able to take on a giant menacing form that can shoot lasers? Then one of the human bad guys who shouldn't exist but look cool sees a lot of seismic activity and plans on dropping an atomic bomb. Then what took so long if they want to take over the world for so long and they're fine with this? This just seems stupid. So the atomic bomb gets sent towards Mr. P, and Morty's upset that they came to this dimension just to wreck it even more. Rick says that Mr. P busted the portal gun badly and gets so desperate that he tells Morty to believe in Zeus. He says he had a vision of Roman Rick, so if he wants to survive, he'll have to. He was really desperate, because he wasn't given any proof of Zeus from that. I mean, sure, there are infinite universes, so there probably would be him, but there's no reason he would help someone in a different universe who has a bad reputation at that.